They said I wouldn't survive without them. I proved them wrong. My name is Mariana. I'm 34 years old, and for a long time I avoided sharing this part of my life because, honestly, it hurts to remember. But lately I've realized that holding on to this story was only keeping me trapped in a past I no longer want to carry. I was born into a wealthy family, the kind everyone thinks lives in a fairy tale. My father, Fernando, and my mother, Beatriz, owned a highly respected wine import business. I grew up surrounded by luxury, travel, good schools, but also by absurd rules, pressure, and a lack of freedom. It was as if my life was already decided before I even understood who I was. From an early age, it was clear that my future, according to them, would be working in the family business. It didn't matter if I wanted to or not. When I was 15, my mother would say things like, "We give you everything, so the least you can do is continue what we've built." I've always loved interior design. I'd spend hours redesigning my room, moving furniture around, creating color combinations in my notebook. But every time I mentioned it, they'd cut me off. "That's a hobby, Mariana, not a profession." The trigger came when I finished college. Against their wishes, I studied architecture. I remember the day I announced I'd landed a job at an incredible firm, still small, but brimming with creative projects. They looked at me as if I'd betrayed the family. My father said with that icy tone, "If you walk out that door to pursue that ridiculous job, you don't have to come back." I thought it was just a threat. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I was called to a family meeting. They said that if I didn't accept a position at the company, I would lose everything. My last name, my access to inheritance, my house, even my health insurance. I thought it was an exaggeration, but no, they actually registered the name change, forcing me to adopt my maternal grandmother's surname, and, in effect, erased me from the family tree. My room was emptied, my belongings donated without my knowledge. It was as if I had died to them. At first, I tried to convince myself I'd be fine, but within the first week of living alone, I realized I had nothing but a meager salary, a mattress on the floor, and some borrowed pots and pans. I slept in fear of not being able to pay the rent. I cried in secret in the bathroom at work more times than I can count. It wasn't just a lack of money. It was the feeling that I didn't belong anywhere. My parents still found ways to get to me. They called mutual friends, begging them not to help me. One time, I found out my father had called the owner of a firm where I was being considered for a position and told me I was unstable and ungrateful. I lost my chance. That broke me in a way I had never felt before. Time passed, and despite everything, I managed to establish myself in my career. I was promoted, then moved to a larger office. I worked late, refused weekends and holidays, and used every penny to stabilize myself. But even with my achievements, deep down, I still wanted them to call me and say they regretted it. This need for validation gnawed at me. The first contact in years came from Felipe, my older brother. He'd always been the perfect son, obedient, an executive at the company, and the pride of my parents. I received a message from him saying they wanted to talk. My heart raced. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part trembled at the thought of seeing them. I agreed to meet Felipe. He appeared with that air of someone who believed he was in control. He said my parents were sorry, that they wanted to start over, but that to do so I would have to forget the past and act maturely. In other words, pretend nothing had happened and fit back into their mold. I took a deep breath and said, no, I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to pretend. He was furious. He said I was being ungrateful, that I was destroying the family. But deep down, I realized there was something else. Fear. Fear of speaking out. Fear of exposing myself. The following weeks were strange. Felipe began showing up at places I frequented, always by chance. He asked questions about my life, my friends, my work, until one day, Isabella, his wife, came to me alone. She was nervous, but she spoke bluntly. "Mariana, I know what they did to you. And it wasn't just you. Felipe, he's violent. To me, to other people. I can't keep quiet anymore." Hearing that gave me a mix of shock and confirmation. I knew my family was abusive, but I hadn't imagined the extent. Isabella said she wanted to report it, that she had proof, and that she needed someone to support her. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to disappear and not get involved, but another part knew this was the moment to break the cycle. When the complaint broke, it was like a bombshell. Old stories surfaced, assaults, employee manipulation, threats. The local press was thrilled. The company, once seen as a beacon of tradition and respect, began to crumble. Customers cut contracts, suppliers terminated agreements. My father appeared in the news with a haggard face. I won't lie, it was hard to watch. Part of me felt a kind of justice being served, but another part hurt. After all, these were my parents. This was the life I'd known, but now it was all exposed, and there was no going back. For the first time, they had no control over the narrative. After all this, there were no further attempts to contact me. I moved on with my life. I opened my own design studio and secured clients I never would have reached had I remained in my family's shadow. I still struggle with trauma, fear of rejection, difficulty trusting, but every day I realize that my freedom is worth more than any surname or inheritance. In the first months after the scandal, I still woke up scared, thinking I was going to get a call or a subpoena. I was afraid of retaliation. I even changed my routes and avoided certain places. It was only after realizing they were too busy trying to put out their own fire that I began to breathe easier. Isabella remained steadfast in the process. I accompanied her to some hearings, and I confess that seeing Felipe sitting in the dock was a strange feeling. Not of revenge, but of reality. It was as if, for the first time, he was feeling the weight of his own actions, the same weight he and my parents made me carry for years. Little by little, my name began to be associated with something other than family. An article about my design studio appeared, featuring a project I'd done for a small restaurant. I received messages from people saying they were inspired by my journey. That resonated with me. For the first time, I realized my story could serve a purpose other than pain. Of course, not everything was easy. I still experienced moments of intense loneliness. Holidays like Christmas and birthdays were filled with a void that was hard to explain. Friends tried to fill the void, but I knew the absence was permanent. I learned to create my own rituals, my own special moments. I also had to face the ugly side that remained within me. Distrust, the tendency to expect the worst from people. I went to therapy, and it was a turning point. I learned to identify when my reactions were about the present and when they were echoes of the past. It's a process, and I'm still in it. One day I received a message from an unknown number. It was from my mother. Just a few words. "I'm sorry for everything, but we can't undo the past." I read it over and over, trying to feel something beyond indifference. But the truth is, there was no longer room for her in my life. I deleted the message. I think that was the moment I realized my story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about how I'd managed to build something solid without support, without a safety net. And I'm not just talking about work, but about who I am today. More confident, more aware of my worth. When I look back, I see that the turning point wasn't when they disowned me. It was when I said no to going back. That's when I broke a lifelong logic. That's when I proved to myself that my freedom wasn't for sale. Many people think that getting over it means forgetting. It's not. I remember everything. I remember the sound of my father's voice kicking me out. I remember the feeling of carrying my suitcase for the first time to a place I wasn't sure I could afford. But today, those memories don't control me. There's a huge difference between living with pain and living in pain. For a long time, I lived in it. Today, it's with me, but it no longer dictates the rules. And that's perhaps the greatest victory I've ever had. My studio grew. I hired 2 people, signed contracts with companies that believe in my work, not my last name. I won a local award and dedicated the achievement to anyone who has ever felt too small to dream. I cried on stage, not from sadness, but from relief. Isabella, in turn, rebuilt her own life. We became very close, and she told me that my stance helped her gain courage. That was powerful to hear. I always saw myself as someone who was just reacting to survive, but I realized that, unintentionally, I had inspired someone. Today, when I meet someone trapped in a toxic family relationship, I don't romanticize reconciliation. I don't believe blood justifies abuse. Family is someone who respects and supports you, not someone who controls you and destroys your autonomy. This is a lesson that came at a high price, but one I carry with pride. I have no plans to rekindle ties, not out of resentment, but because I understand that the life I want doesn't fit within the conditions they impose, and I will no longer shrink to fit into the space others offer me. If you're reading this and feel trapped in a role that isn't yours, know this: there's life on the other side. It's hard, it's lonely, and sometimes it seems impossible. But the feeling of being able to choose who you are without asking permission is liberating. I lost a family, but I gained myself. And that to me is worth more than any legacy.